All of this as we're waiting to hear what the Judiciary Committee is going to do with the President's Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch, and whether they can avoid a calamity here, a simple majority, or will the judge have the 60 votes necessary to avoid any of the so-called nuclear option talk? Chad Pergram joins us on the phone, our Capitol Hill senior producer. Chad, what are you hearing?
Well, there are still some unannounced senators here. We just had a cryptic statement from Michael Bennet, who's a Democratic senator from Colorado, who introduced Neil Gorsuch, and he says he would oppose the filibuster, but kept his powder dry, did not announce what he would do about confirming Gorsuch. And, of course, you know, Neil Gorsuch is from Colorado, and he co-introduced Neil Gorsuch at his confirmation hearing. That said, it seems pretty unlikely that Gorsuch, regardless of how the remaining 4 or 5 senators come out with their statements here, that they're going to be able to get 60 votes to avoid a filibuster. A successful filibuster has never happened in the history of the United States with a Supreme Court nominee. Abe Fortas in 1968 was already on the high court, and this was an issue to promote him to be the Chief Justice of the United States, and he was successfully filibustered. So here's what we think is going to happen. They're going to formally start debate on the Gorsuch nomination tomorrow on the floor. At the same time, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, will file what we call cloture. This is an effort to end a filibuster, and that usually has to lay over for 2 days. And then you would have the procedural vote to see whether or not they could get 60 votes on Thursday. Thursday seems to be the magic day in this process. If they can't get 60, that's where Mitch McConnell may light the fuse on the nuclear option. What happens here is that if you have a failed cloture vote, this gets a little bit in the weeds, but it's very important. If you have a failed cloture vote, you can't have any more debate on an issue. You're kind of stuck in this parliamentary cul-de-sac. And at that point, you know, this is practically throbbing with political isotopes. That's where McConnell could simply ask whoever is presiding over the Senate, would be Mike Pence or anybody else, and say, we believe, make a point of order, we believe that it should be only a simple majority to overcome a filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. The chair would rule against him because that's not the Senate precedent. And then McConnell would ask the Senate to appeal the ruling of the chair. And if he has more than 51 votes, which we largely think he would, then the Senate would vote to establish a new precedent. And then they would invoke the cloture, vote to cut off the filibuster then. And then by rule, you get 30 hours after you cut off a filibuster, probably sometime Friday night, regardless if they do the nuclear option or don't do the nuclear option. That's when Neil Gorsuch would be confirmed for the Supreme Court Friday night.
So let me answer that. The last time, the closest vote we've ever had in recent memory for a Supreme Court justice, of course, was Clarence Thomas in 1991. That was a 52-48 vote. Yeah. Did they have these Byzantine rules in effect then?
Yeah, they had those rules, but it was sort of granted that somebody could get past 60 votes. Just because you have someone who votes to end a filibuster does not necessarily mean that they will vote to confirm. And a lot of senators, regardless of the issue, even if they oppose a bill or they oppose a nominee, they're willing to vote to end debate and let the process run its course. That's what's unique here. And Neil, this is where we come back to, this problem with justices and how the Democrats back in 2013 kind of opened Pandora's box. They did something in this parliamentary gambit that I just described here on all other types of executive branch nominees, judges, cabinet officials, you name it. They lowered that bar from 60 to 51 by establishing that new precedent. And I want to underscore this. This is not a rules change. It's a precedent change. The Senate operates on precedent.
So if Harry Reid was making that precedent change when it came to cabinet appointments, they deliberately said this does not apply to Supreme Court appointments. Is it really a big deal one way or the other if it is?
Well, it is because, a lot of people think that was the beauty in the Senate, that it took supermajorities to do things. And by lowering that bar on all the types of executive nominations in 2013, that cut into the Senate's right of debate a little bit there. If they do the nuclear option this week on Supreme Court nominees, that cuts into it a little further. And then the real problem is, do they completely get rid of the filibuster on all types of legislation? That's always been the pristine province of the United States Senate. And it's hard to believe if they do the nuclear option this week on Supreme Court nominees that they don't toss the filibuster eventually on all types of legislation.
All right, buddy, we'll keep a close eye.